What happens if you cover tofu in salt? Will it cure? Will it be like a dry salt brine? I wanted to find that out because I know of a trick where you cook tofu in salted boiling water, and then once you pull that tofu out, you can flavor it, chop it up, and fry it and end up with a nice crispy tofu. It really works, I tried it. But with all of my tofu tests I've been doing recently, I wanted to find out about a dry cure. Will it pull out the moisture, and are we able to flavor the tofu with that dry brine? I wanted to find out. It's a common practice with meat. But before we salt this tofu, I want to figure out exactly what dry brining is, what it does, and why. So I just learned about a thing called the osmotic potential. Essentially, it measures the potential of water to move from one water-holding membrane through to another. And salt does that. Essentially, water is going to move from one environment to another environment if there is a place for the water to move to. So like, you know, if you have like a dry towel and you wrap it around tofu and press, the osmotic potential is pretty high because the water is going to move from one membrane into that dry towel. The towel's going to soak it all up. So from what I've learned with a dry salt brine is essentially you're moving moisture from one cell membrane through to the salt. But then once the salt becomes nice and waterlogged, it's going to suck up all of those flavors, and now the osmotic potential of the item that you've salted becomes higher, and that now flavored brine is going to move back into the thing that you've salted. So in our case, the tofu, we're going to pull that moisture out, get it salty and flavorful, and then the tofu is going to suck some of it back in. Not all of it, because the osmotic potential is going to start going down. So in the end, my guess, just like lots of other fruits and vegetables and meats where people traditionally do this, where it lends to more flavorful foods, I'm thinking we might end up with something more flavorful in the end with this tofu, albeit it might be extremely salty and not usable. Now, I use the osmotic potential quite a bit in a lot of my recipes. If you've ever watched me make the daikon radish bacon, I always salt the daikon to pull out all of that bitter moisture from the daikon, and then I replace it with more flavorful liquid. But I'm wondering if I would be better off doing that in one step. Like if I were to flavor the salt with dry ingredients that have that bacon flavor, would I then pull the moisture out of the daikon, flavor it up, and then have it get sucked back in? Would I make a better daikon bacon? We're not going to test that today. That's for another video. Let's get moving with our salted tofu. I'm wondering, I'm thinking this is going to work. Okay, so now that we know about the whole dry brining process, let's go ahead and test this. I have two tofus. I'm going to weigh them and make sure that they're the same weight. Now, I'm going to assume that the coagulated tofu, the amount of tofu that's in here, is the same, and then any variation in weight is going to be liquid. So I'm going to try to even these out by pressing them. So now for one of them, I'm going to treat it just like any regular block of tofu. I'm going to throw it in a tofu press. We'll press it for about 30 minutes and then marinate it for about 60 minutes, and we'll see what happens. For this one, we're going to whip up a mixture of kosher salt and some of our chicken flavor broth mix. This is vegan chicken flavor broth mix. Now what I'm hoping is that osmosis works by drawing the moisture out of the tofu, sucking up all of that flavor, and then pushing it back in. We might end up with a super salty piece of tofu, we'll find out, but let's get going. We're gonna let this rest in the salt for 90 minutes, and then we'll weigh this. Okay, so it's been about 30 minutes. I'm gonna dump the pressed tofu. I really should have weighed this water here, but I think it's okay because we're gonna weigh the tofu. And it looks like it's gonna come in at around 322 grams, so we lost some weight. Now we're just gonna make our broth, which is just gonna be our chicken flavored broth mix. It's a vegan chicken. We're gonna dunk that, let that sit for an hour. Okay, so these have been sitting for about 90 minutes. Now, I'm assuming that this one's gonna weigh a little bit more because it got soaked back up in the water again. So we're just gonna weigh both of these and just see what the difference is. So this one is back up to 396 grams. So it never made it all the way back up. It soaked up some more liquid, but it didn't soak it all the way back. So that's kind of nice. That's actually better than what I expected. Now for the salted tofu, I mean, who knows where we're gonna be at? Did we lose any liquid? Did we lose a lot of liquid? So my best guess is that we lost some of the moisture and it was replaced with just a little bit of flavored moisture. So this is at 408 grams. We didn't really drop that much liquid. We did get some liquid out, but not much. So this is gonna be interesting. This is gonna be very interesting.
Now at this point we have to prepare these to cook them, and I wanted to try to get them around the same size. That's why I'm using this handle, but then I realized that was too thick of a piece. I decided to try to cut it in half and then just ended up butchering a piece of tofu. So I just kind of winged it and just went to slicing what I believed would be good sized slices. Now you can see the salted tofu, this one right here, actually feels quite a bit more firm. It has a little bit more denseness to it, where this pressed tofu, I feel like it's gonna break apart. The salted tofu actually felt tighter. Now we're just gonna cook these up in a hot pan, very lightly oiled. I don't wanna like impart any flavor. Now just like I've done in the past, the salted version, the test version, is the one with the toothpicks. The one that's pressed is the non-toothpicked tofu. These are gonna cook up for just a few minutes. I'm almost kind of toasting them. I just wanna get them hot. This is an awesome sound that happened when I cooked this tofu. I just can't. Now we're gonna flip the other side. Hopefully it does the same. I'm a child, I can't help it. Now let's get ready for the taste test. Monica doesn't know which one is which one's flavored and which one is salted.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna taste just some plain raw tofu first, and then we'll taste cooked. We'll taste them both, so just hold your feelings for it until the end, and we'll just see if one is better than the other. So go ahead. Okay, so after a lot of tasting back and forth, there's not a huge amount of difference. What's your thoughts on the taste? Just the taste alone, between the raw and the raw?
Yeah, I like that version better.
There's not a huge difference, but it could be something to test. It could be something to play with.
It definitely has more flavor, you know?
It definitely has more flavor, and I really do like the bite that you get out of this one versus this one. Now this one is the salt brined version, where this one is the one that was just pressed and marinated. I think the salt brine, which is wild that it has so much more flavor, it is quite a bit more saltier, so you'd have to figure out a way to combat that salt. Maybe a little bit more like sweetness, like add some more sugar to it.
Or like have it in a bowl of rice or something like that, where you're eating something that is matching with the salt, you know?
Oh yeah, like if you were to pair it with something that you would use less salt on, and overall this would be your salty flavors for the rest of your dish.
Yeah.
I think this is a method to mess with. I think this is a method to try more and see what happens. I'm excited to see. It definitely created a different textured tofu. I mean, you can see the difference between the two. You can feel the difference on the edge being more firm, being drier, and able to get a crispier, crunchier piece of tofu. I really like how that went all the way through. It really penetrated all the way through that.
All the way through, yeah.
That's great. It's just a test. This was the very beginning of this process, but I think it's a test that's worth messing with more.
Agreed.
Yeah, let's keep going on this one.